Our stores, I'm just speaking broadly across my entire system, we average around 1.5. And that's quite a bit higher than the Little Caesars average, which I think is around 1.1 or 1.2 now. But it's definitely increased over the last few years. My best store does around 3.3. And, when you have stores that do that kind of volume, EBITDA can be upwards of
I feel like there's two parts as far as like the starting point for you and Little Caesars. It's you growing up as a kid in your father's stores, and then part two is later on in life when you chose to quit your corporate job and become a franchisee yourself. So we'll get to all of it, but
yeah.
I'd love to start with part one. What is your first memory of Little Caesars?
It's actually really cool. So my dad and his brothers decided to bring Little Caesars to Bakersfield, California in 1986. And that was before I was born, before he was married and all that. And I guess this is going to reveal my age a little bit. But a few years later, I came into this world. And I think he always likes to say that he actually had a grand opening for one of his stores like a week after I was born. So he was building his whole company throughout my entire childhood. And the way that him and his brothers did it was really brick by brick, very different than the way that my partners and I are doing it with the acquisitions and the debt and all that stuff. They would just put their life savings into one, and then once they saved up enough money, they opened up the second one, and they stayed in the same city, and they stayed super involved in the community, and just did it with zero debt and slow, right? They opened up their most recent store a couple years back, and that's number 15, and that's since 1986. But nothing against the way they did it. I have a lot of respect for it. We chose a different route. I don't know who did it right or not, but yeah. Going back to your original question, he had his office in the back of one of his restaurants, and he would take me to work with him, and it's not really fun being in an office, but what is fun? Being in a restaurant kitchen. So I would, Dad, let me go inside the store, and so they would set up a stool for me because I wasn't quite able to reach the tables, and they would put like a bale of boxes there. And my job would be to fold the boxes and get them ready for pizzas to be put in them. So that saves that one step at the oven. So I would just sit there on a stool and just fold boxes. And I probably think that I did a lot more than I actually did. I was probably more of a burden at the time. But those are my memories, is just folding boxes on that stool so I could reach the counter, taking orders with the assistance of someone else. Like, oh, that's so cute, a little kid. And I'm like, oh, what can I get for you today? But other than that, I wasn't really able to do much when I was young. Now, I eventually graduated, and they finally let me put pepperonis on a pizza, and that was like a big day for me, right? But it's like the next easiest thing you can do is just put the pepperonis one by one on a pizza. So, yeah, those are my first kind of couple memories, was just going to work with Dad, going to his office, and then escaping out of his office, and him having someone else kind of watch me while he gets some work done.
I think it's interesting, too, especially the time your father started. That's like really in the era. I mean, he lived through what people call now like the big pizza wars, right, in the 90s, where there's Domino's and Pizza Hut really battling, but like Little Caesars was right there too. So is there anything that you remember or that your father's just told you in passing at any time of, was there ever concern for the brand that he chose at being Little Caesars versus a Domino's or a Pizza Hut? Or did it not really come into play and it was more just down to him as an operator?
Yes to all of those things. And I'll start with the first one. When he first came to Bakersfield, and then he loves to tell me the story all the time, is they were driving the town to see if, it's a good fit for Little Caesars. And what the group he was with and him noticed was that there was a pizza place on every corner. And they're like, oh, that's a lot of competition. And my dad always tells me the story. He's like, well, the people here must like pizza. So they ended up deciding to go with it, and he was right. The people in Bakersfield really love pizza, and in fact, it's the Bakersfield market hit my dad and his brother's 15 stores have won the highest sales in the Little Caesars system for 13 years straight to this day. So every year at the conference, they get an award, and I go up there alongside my partners with them too, because we help them with their operations. But it wasn't always like that. I know that in the late 90s, Little Caesars was really struggling as a brand, and until they rolled out the $5 pizza, which changed the brand, it was failing compared to some of its competition. And I remember my dad telling me that he would go to these Little Caesars conferences, and it was like depressing. People are closing stores, less and less people every year. And it just all goes back down to the community, I think, because he never really had that big of a struggle because he was so involved in the community. He was part of the Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary clubs. He was just so involved everywhere you go. And I always tell him this, like anytime I would go outside the house with him, people would stop him and like talk to him, and I would go crazy. I'm like, Dad, I'm trying to go bowling with you. Like, stop talking to this person for 20 minutes. But it just goes to say how important it is to be involved in the community. And being that him and his brothers focused on one market and just kind of expanded there and like completely owned it, I think attributes to why they've been able to find such success there.
I think it would come as a shock to some folks that someone who owns a Little Caesars, because the way you're describing your father, it's what you'd expect of like your stereotypical like small business owner, local independent mom and pop owner, like trying to get involved in their community and getting to know people. Where I think a lot of folks today just see Little Caesars, the big brand, right, nationally present, and they'd probably be surprised to know that like franchise owners are still doing that and getting out and about just to get the word out to ultimately form the relationships, but hopefully probably serve one another.
Yeah, exactly. And we try to keep that going to this day. Obviously, for me and my group, it's a little bit more difficult to be active in each of our communities. We're in Oregon, we're in Arizona, we're in all throughout California. But one thing that we've been doing is doing these community days where we say at Little Caesars, it's called the Little Caesars Fun Day or Little Caesars Community Day. We did it a couple months ago in each of our markets where we rented out a park, brought a bunch of pizza, brought a clown, brought like a bounce house, and just gave out free pizza and just let people have a great Sunday and enjoy it on the Little Caesars brand. And we didn't take credit for it. We didn't say it's our company name. We all did it under the Little Caesars brand, and it was a huge success. And we had thousands of people that showed up, and we got to give out free pizza. And so we try to do small things to keep that legacy going, but it does get a little bit more difficult as you scale and grow to be as active in all those communities like he was back in the day.
Back to kind of your childhood in Little Caesars, how did your role develop? Let's say like through the end of high school before you went to college. By senior year, are you making the pizzas in full? I think where you left us before, you had your first day being able to put pepperonis down. So how did that evolve?
Yeah, it definitely evolved. So as I grew up and as actually my cousins grew up, I had a huge community in Bakersfield. As soon as people started being able to drive, it made things a lot easier for my dad and my uncles to actually put us on the schedule and expect us to do some work. And so I remember being on shifts with my cousins. They'd pick me up, whether it was Jeff or Andrew and Mario, and we would go and we would run shifts together. And that was actually really fun. And I was doing more of the actual operations of the business and getting to hang out with my older cousins, which I like idolized at that point. And I remember specifically there was one store we were working in, Andrew and I, and right next door to it was a video game store. And every single time we would go to work, we would work our 4-hour shifts or whatever, and then go right next door to the video game store and play video games for like an hour. And it was like the best thing ever. But as my cousins continued going off to college themselves, and then I was doing this work by myself, it became way less fun. and I'm actually like, a lot of my family is very entrepreneurial. So my mom, she actually ended up getting involved in a business in an ice rink pool. Like it was a public ice rink and pool where she did the snack bar there, and we did all sorts of different foods there. So I stopped working at Little Caesars and I worked at her snack bar and learned that whole business and ran the pool section of it. And it was cool watching her kind of develop her entrepreneurial spirit and develop vendor relationships and this and that. And then my grandmother had a doctor's billing service, and I was like, okay, I'm done with food. So my senior year, I actually got to work in an office doing doctor's billing, which was wildly boring. But I was just not working for my mom or my dad anymore, and I was working for my very easygoing grandma. So that was kind of how my roles evolved in working for my parents and then there. But yeah, I was wanting to get out of Bakersfield, to be completely honest. I was like, all right, look, I'm getting out of this place. I don't want to be in the food industry ever again. I don't want to do any doctor's billing. I just want to go study marketing, get a job at an advertising agency, and kind of let my creative juices flow. So that's kind of where I left Bakersfield to Cal State Fullerton. That's where I did my undergrad. And then after that, I did a job in San Diego in an advertising firm, and I really didn't like that either. So I ended up pursuing my MBA at UC San Diego at the Rady School of Management, and was gung-ho on getting into finance, which I inevitably did. I worked for an asset management firm here in San Diego that managed $4 or $5 billion, but I still wasn't fulfilled. And that's when I started looking back at my cousins and my dad and everyone that's doing this entrepreneurial thing and being like, maybe that wasn't so bad after all.
Well, so it's funny though. It sounds like when you graduated high school, the thought was like, okay, I'm sick of this. I've done it for probably, we're in your dad's office in that first Little Caesars since 5 or 6 years old, I'd imagine. And so, yeah, the thought was just like, I'm leaving this all behind. And you did make your way back, of course. Like that wasn't the intention.
No, it definitely wasn't the intention. When I was doing my MBA, I was like, look, I'm gonna move to New York. I'm gonna, go that whole like high finance route, and
Yeah.
zero intention of like. I actually like dreaded the entrepreneurial classes. Like, why am I gonna do that? But things changed pretty quickly. But I think everything happens kind of for a reason. So,
Yeah.
pretty happy for what ended up happening.
Yeah. 33 stores for Little Caesars. That's not including the Jersey Mike's or Coco Playa. So let's just take it though to your transition from life as a W-2 employee to getting to own your first Little Caesars or a handful of Little Caesars. You obviously have family in the brand. So
Yeah.
did you tap into that family network for help for that first store? Can you kind of just walk us through that transition to ownership?
I was seeing my family really thriving, both Little Caesars or different entrepreneurial ways, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna pursue this. So my first stop was to my dad and my uncles, and I was like, hey guys, ready to join the family business? I'll move back to Bakersfield and all that, and they didn't think it was a good idea at the time, which looking back at it, I think they were right about that. So I started working on a couple different things. I was doing. I started working on a acai bowl concept and trying to put one together and see about opening that. Ended up fizzling out. I actually flew out to Champaign, Illinois, and I met with Jimmy John's, and I was looking at
Oh,
becoming the Jimmy John's franchisee. Yeah.
yeah.
So this is all before anything happened with my ownership in Little Caesars, and being a huge Jersey Mike's fan and wasn't super into doing the Jimmy John's route, which again, everything happens for a reason. And then my cousin Andrew, who I mentioned earlier, we used to go play video games after work together. He's someone that you've met before. He's super high respected in the franchise industry. He has Dave's Hot Chicken. He's number one, like the first franchisee for Dave's Hot Chicken. He has several Little Caesars and Jersey Mike's and a bunch of different things he's working on. But back then he was, I think, just in Little Caesars. And he actually brought me a deal that he thought would be interesting, which is for 2 pretty low volume Little Caesars pizzas in Yuma, Arizona. And the way we were looking at it was like, all right, it's not that far from San Diego. These are 2 low volumes, so they're not going to be that expensive. And they have potential, right? We know the brand, we know the business. So anyways, we ended up pursuing that. And that was kind of my start into Little Caesars with these 2 low volume stores. I think they did like 900,000 in revenue. One of them did 900,000. One of them did like 850. And yeah, and then fast forward a year later, I ended up becoming a Jersey Mike's franchisee and then opening Jersey Mike's in Yuma as well. So yeah, then I was at 3 stores and spending a lot of time in Yuma.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how my start in the franchise world got started. I was a multi-brand franchisee kind of from the beginning, which,
Yeah.
it's probably not the smartest route to go, but we made it work. And then fast forward, a lot of things changed and happened, and I ended up partnering up with my current partners who are Jeffrey Feghali and Johnny Baclini, and they're also involved in my dad and brother's business. And I always think back about, I'm so fortunate to have the partners that I have because they are very smart, and Johnny is probably one of the best operators in the Little Caesars system from just systems and all that stuff, and I needed a little bit of structure help, and he came in and definitely helped with that, and that's what took us from being able to go from where we are at 3 to where we are today. And everything kind of escalated after that, right? So
Yeah.
once Johnny and Jeff and I partnered up, we actually like started approaching and tackling bigger deals, being willing to take on more debt, and because we had some confidence in the brand and what we were doing, and that's kind of where everything started. So pretty big jump from the 3 to that next acquisition, which was I think 4 stores that were really high volume stores.
We'll kind of go from the first deal to 33, but when did that first deal happen? Like, how far back are we talking here as far as the timeline?
The 2 in Yuma, we closed on December 26, 2016. So
Oh.
pretty much 2017. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
That's really fast growth for you guys then to go
yeah,
from
yeah,
a couple
exactly.
stores to 33 in under 10 years.
Exactly. So those 2 was on 2016, and then Jersey Mike's opened August of 2018, which was 2 weeks after my wedding. So my wife was stoked to have to spend her honeymoon in Yuma in 110-degree weather,
Yeah.
going from business to business and handing out, telling them that we're
We're
raising money for
slicing
the
deli
shop.
meats for our honeymoon. I'm sure she loved that.
Yeah, exactly. And then the first deal that Jeff, Johnny, and I did was in October of 2018, and that was for one Little Caesars Pizza in Ridgecrest, California, which is a funny story. It's a store that my dad and his brothers built and then sold, and then we ended up buying it. So
Yeah.
it came full circle in our family.
So those first 2 units, you said they were underperforming. I think you said like 850 to 900K in revenue per store. What gave you the confidence to be able to turn it around. Because I look at like Little Caesars and I'd say this about a lot of like the big national kind of blue chip brands and franchising in the QSR world. There's not a lot that you can control, right? Like they're going to be running national commercials. You don't have a say in that. The brand, right? Like the orange signs, the little pizza guy, the pizza logo or slogan, the dough that you're using. Like a lot of this is corporate run, and they're kind of not forcing, but you're at the mercy of what they're doing. And then even in this deal, 'cause one of the variables that a franchisee always has, right, is like they can pick the location so they can get good real estate, or I've seen a lot of franchisees go off the rails and pick a really poor site, and that hurts you. But in this case, you're moving into stores where the location's set. You know a lot more about Little Caesars than a lot of people on planet Earth. So that you guys, I gotta imagine, can just look at a store and know if it's within the realm of being able to be fixed. And so, yeah, I'm curious if you can kind of get into the weeds for us. What did you see that was opportunity for you?
You hit it on the head. It is really difficult because there is so many things that we can't control, right? And if it's a bad location, it's a bad location, right? Unless you're willing to relocate it and make the investment to move it to a better location, there's sometimes very little you can do to just cure low volume. So for us, when we were looking at those two locations and how we actually look at most of the locations, because when we do big acquisitions, we're actually buying packages of stores, and there might be 5 or 6 that are good, but there's always a couple that are dogs in the package, and we have to really dig into, like, are these salvageable stores? Are they relocatable, or are they just going to be those dogs that we're just going to have to write off or take on the chin for a while until we can do anything to turn it around? So it is difficult. I think one thing that you can do off the bat is squeeze more money out of a store. So if the operations aren't up to par and you don't have good systems into place, and even if you're not raising the top line, you could probably increase the bottom line a little bit. The other piece of it is that, yeah, it's the same dough, yeah, it's the same process, but there is a hospitality component, which is we take a lot of pride in, and like making sure that the customers are always happy and you're asking them about their day and all that, but also getting consistent product. And I think that one of the big things that poor operators are not able to do is just have good enough operations to secure that the customer is getting that product every time, whether it's not enough sauce, incorrectly cut, too much cheese. There's ways that when someone goes to one Little Caesars, they should expect the same pizza at another one, and sometimes operators are not able to do that. So just being able to give the customer the experience they expect, there's a big upside there. And I think just being able to put in our systems that are able to make a good pizza, run a good shift, have the right amount of people staffed so that people aren't waiting in lines out the door, even though it's a slow store. There's ways to do that, because then the people talk in the community, like, okay, hey, that Little Caesars over there really turned around. Maybe we should go check it out again. But what you said is super valuable, that sometimes it's just a bad location and it's like super inconvenient for the guests to get to. It doesn't make sense. I'll give you one example. We have a location in Oregon, and it's just a town that's like a ghost town. Like maybe when they built it 20 years ago that it was a thriving town, but right now it's like everyone's gone. We're the only people left in our center, and even relocating it doesn't really make sense. We're like, okay, like the customers are not here, so what do we do here?
Well, as far as the consistency, right? People put in their orders, and you guys make the pizza basically the way they expect. Yeah. So you're telling me that you do see an impact on the top line revenue over time if you're dialed in. Let's say you take over a store, those poor performing stores, for your first 2, and immediately there's just an efficiency and operational improvement, so that when people are ordering pizzas, they're getting what they want. And is it 6 months down the line? Is it a year down the line? Like, how soon do you expect to actually see the top line growth start to kick in, because word spreads, people come back because then they can trust you? What does that look like?
We would think that it was 6 months, but we were proven wrong. It takes a good amount of time to see any type of change, and I would say that even with some acquisitions that we've taken over where they're kind of underperforming stores, it's taken close to a year and a half to see any type of improvement, right? And it's just having to just keep grinding and making sure that you're staying true to staying true to having the best product and hospitality and cleanliness and all that. And it does end up paying off most of the time, but sometimes it takes, longer than others. I think upgrades in equipment is another piece that, we talk with the franchisor about this all the time. Like, some of these stores, when we take them over, They look exactly like the same one I worked in 2000, right? Like they haven't done any investment in equipment, haven't done any investment in, just besides the mandatory remodels that the franchisor will make you do. Like from the back of the house, it's like they're using a 30-year-old oven, and they're using the old dough mixer, and they don't have the kind of the new innovations that being a part of a franchise system is you should be able to take advantage of all the innovations and investments they make into R&D. And luckily in Little Caesars we have an amazing chief innovation officer in Ed Gleich, and he's been really moving the brand forward and trying bringing more and more innovations to the store. But even just buying a new oven for the store, it creates efficiencies when it terms like pizza speed. It actually ends up making you a better pizza. And it just sometimes it just takes investment, right? You're always investing in your people and the external appearance, but sometimes it just takes investment in the back of the house to really see some changes be made.
As far as today, like a typical Little Caesars, what would you expect performance to look like? Whether it's your stores or just anecdotally hearing from other franchisees. But yeah, I mean, what are the economics of a typical Little Caesars from?
Our stores, and I'm just speaking broadly across my entire system, we average around 1.5. And that's quite a bit higher than the Little Caesars average, which I think is around 1.1 or 1.2 now. But it's definitely increased over the last few years. Little Caesars as a whole, as a brand, has been doing really well over the last few years. This year has been a little bit slower, I think, just because we had such an amazing performance year last year with the pizza puffs that they rolled out and some great LTOs. Before that, they had the pretzel crust, which people were going crazy about, all went viral and all that. So they've done really great as a brand, increasing the AUVs across the system. My best store does around 3.3, and when you have stores that do that kind of volume, EBITDA can be upwards of 20, and those are our stars. And they don't have to be some huge footprints, and the particular store I'm talking about is like 1,200 square feet, but it just cranks. It's just in a perfect location. It's in a perfect demographic. And it just depends on geography as well. So like, we have a store in Arizona, in Yuma, that does about 2.4, 2.5, but has the same income as that one in California that does 3.3. So when you're talking from different states, there's different unit economics that you can expect. And, some states are better than others, and, we don't have to get into the politics of things, but those are the stars of the portfolio. Now, there's obviously going to be dogs, just like I was talking about earlier, and especially when you're doing the way that we've grown is buying packages of stores, and we have a criteria that we look for, but sometimes to get, 5 stores that meet that criteria, you have to take on a few that need some help, and you hope that you can elevate the sales in those stores, but sometimes, like we talked about, it's just too difficult. Now, we do a lot of marketing. We do like direct mailers and bounce backs and all that. We're trying to use more and more of the social media and digital marketing channels. It's a little bit difficult with being a part of a franchise system because they already do it themselves. But we can talk about that more a little bit with Coco Playa. But like we've seen a lot of influencer stuff work. So we're looking at working with our franchisor and figuring out how to collaborate on some local influencers and stuff to try to elevate sales through those marketing channels.
I'd imagine too. I'm always curious about the NIL, the college athletes that can now get paid more. I've seen some franchises do some interesting things with local college athletes just to bring in more customers, but just an idea for you.
We have stores next to University of Oregon and OSU. Okay. So we've been actually in contact with OSU about potentially doing something. We'll have to do something with the University of Oregon, but it's definitely an opportunity.
So have you built any stores since acquiring the first 2, or is the whole portfolio of Little Caesars acquisition-based?
The whole portfolio, has been acquisition-based.
Holy crap. So how are you getting these deals? Are you guys hustling just through the Little Caesars franchisee network and saying, hey, we're looking to grow, please call us if you're ever looking to sell?
That is one way. Obviously, a lot of networking happens. We go to the conferences. We're pretty involved in the brand as a whole. It's kind of a closed circle. A lot of people know who we are just from my last name. I mean, my dad has been around the brand forever. I have several cousins that same last name. So that helps. I'm actually in the process of building an AI tool that is going to kind of feed me leads and build a funnel like that, which is super fun. It's something that I've been working on lately. But we don't really know where that's going to go. What's worked for us in the past is just kind of warm reach outs. Hey, where are your neighbors? And we just acquired some stores here. If you're ever looking to sell, love to discuss it. But if not, you ever need to borrow anything, we're right here for you and all that, and kind of going through that route.
And I'd imagine your finance background played a big role as far as being able to like model out. You got to factor in the debt that you're going to be taking on. Can the store's performance cover the debt servicing that you're going to have to do and the interest payments? Did this approach ever scare you, especially growing up with your father, who it sounds like literally just did everything all cash, right?
Yeah.
Like, which part of me actually, I like that. It's obviously the trade-off is it's a lot slower. You're already at higher store count than him, and you're decades behind technically as far as the time in the business. So, but at the same time, he's got 15 stores and probably no debt on them at all, which is pretty nice.
Yeah. And I mean, it's pretty nice that they're like the highest performing stores in the system too. So
Yeah,
it
that's
definitely
crazy.
helps, right? It does scare me sometimes. I mean, especially because there's things that happen if you something from like a political standpoint, right? A new measure gets passed that could really blow up your numbers and not like make it not make sense anymore from a debt to equity perspective and all those things. Luckily, we're found a really great banking partner that helps us really dive into the financials and see whether they make sense or not. We've actually been turning down a lot of deals lately just because we're trying to be super opportunistic when it comes to growth, and we don't want to. We've seen how hard it is to turn around some underperforming stores. Debt is probably the most expensive it's ever been, and it's just not meeting our criteria to take on some deals. So we have to be careful, right? But at the same time, I also think that we're really good at negotiating and making good deals that actually benefit both the seller and the buyer, which is us. And I think it always goes back to relationships too. We just closed on 3 stores in Portland in November of last year, and we've built a relationship with those sellers over like 3 or 4 years, and they're great people, and like we both left the deal like super happy with it. They're high performing stores. They got what they wanted to retire in golf, and we got what we wanted to be able to expand in that area, and they're crushing it. They're doing really well, and I think I may have said this earlier, but I'd rather at this point overpay for great locations than try to look for the deal and end up with some dogs that require so much more time and effort and hours from our staff, and that actually end up bringing down the overall savings that you think that you're getting by negotiating that good deal.
What level of cushion do you recommend franchisees trying to expand their portfolio as far as level of debt to income? Is there something that you're looking for in your models to say, like, hey, like this is within my range of feeling comfortable? Because God forbid, I don't know, just a certain subset of locations, like maybe there's just construction on the road and that crushes your traffic to a store, and then sales are down 20%. I don't know if you'd be able to withstand that, or if that would break a bank covenant. So how do you think about that, and how would you recommend earlier franchisees in their journeys think about it as well?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that it's evolved quite a bit since we started doing this, because back in the day we would be like, oh, what would the seller actually want? But now it's like, no, what would we want? What makes sense for us? And if we don't get the deal, then we don't get the deal. We're okay with it. So I think when you get further along in your journey, you become, I guess, less desperate. I wouldn't say we were desperate before, but we were, trying to make deals happen that maybe weren't the best deal. But yeah, I like to put together financials based on our operations, not the seller's operations, which that's kind of the biggest change that I've done. So I started inputting like all of our overhead and all of like what we would need to run it the way that we run in our system. And when we get that number, that's when we start doing the calculations of, all right, so how much does this cover the debt and that we would have to take on and our monthly payment? And I like to have a 2-to-1 ratio. So, if things go haywire, like they down 30%, like you said, we should be okay to still cover the debt and be fine with that. Even higher is better, obviously. But I think the most important piece right now is for us is to put in all of our expenses that we would take on and kind of actually put some padding in there. So if like, I'll give you an example, when we did an acquisition in Oregon, we ended up having to fly out a bunch of people from California and Arizona to help us with the takeover. And that's just because the way that it worked out, some of the employees left and they didn't like the new management, they didn't like the oversight, and it turned out to be terrible, but we have the staff to support it. But that, takes a significant chunk of what you expected in terms of profitability for that first year. So we're factoring that in, the travel, having people there just in case. And when you start doing the math like that, it lets you sleep a lot better at night.
Yeah. All right. So 2-to-1. I mean, that's a pretty healthy ratio there. And you said something interesting as far as your group runs a Little Caesars a specific way, and you want to factor in for those operations. So differently than the rest of the system, do you have extra hands on deck? Maybe I don't know, 2 team leads or something like that. Are you structuring within the 4 walls something differently than maybe the average franchisee you see in that brand?
I would say, yeah. To answer your first question, we have a general manager, and then we have 2 other people that are trained just as high as the general manager. And we have a pretty stacked bench ready of people that are ready to go and take over in that position. And to become a cashier, you have to pass a test. And so it's pretty structured from when it comes to like the way we run our stores internally, and then we have a tech stack that we put into place. That's how we kind of run the stores. There's a company called Zenput that we use. It's like a checklist on steroids. So incorporating that, we have quality control teams. So we have a team that is looking at our cameras and like finding if people are out of uniform, or if the ready racks aren't full of pizzas, or if there's a line out the door, and counting to make sure that we have the right staff. And then they're talking to the stores. So there's a lot of extra expenses that we add a couple more stores to the portfolio. Maybe that doesn't increase too much, but we also have a district manager, or we call them area coaches now, that have to oversee that store. So we have to add that in. So if it's, just to give you an example, if it's an owner, a husband and wife that have 3 locations and they're the district manager, obviously their salary is not getting incorporated into the P&Ls they sent us, so we have to add that in, right? And we've made that mistake before where we've purchased an owner-operated store, and the owner, now that they sold, is no longer wants to be the general manager because she doesn't want to work for someone. She just cashed out big. So it changes it pretty heavily. So we don't really like to use the labor numbers that were given to us in the P&Ls of the seller. We use our own labor numbers given everything that we know in the market and the studies that we do.
As far as labor within the 4 walls, what does a typical Little Caesars require as far as the headcount? And actually, maybe not even typical. I'd be curious because I think there's clearly some execution edge you guys have, and that $3.3 million store out of, I think it's 1,200 square feet. I mean, that's ridiculous volume per square foot.
Yeah.
What does the labor force look like? Like, how many bodies are cycling through on a given week? And it's delivery and carry out only, so that counter must just be swarmed all the time. I mean, what is going on in that store? How are you doing that?
It's crazy because it doesn't feel that much different than some of the other stores, and it whistles, right? And they make it work, and they have the whole system down. And props to my area coach out there that he's done a great job of making that store work, especially the GM. They know who they are. But yeah, I think from like a body count, it's like around 30 people is a good number to have as far as just on staff. That store might have more, might have less, but it all fluctuates in our industry. There's turnover, but in terms of just labor in general, it really does change based off of like the geographical area that you're in. The higher performing stores, you have a little bit more flexibility. You can, even in like California, you can get like 20-21% labor costs, even sometimes a little less. But when you're talking low performing stores that are ones that are doing $1 million or sub $1 million, it's hard to even break 25%, and even like places like Arizona. So it really just fluctuates based off of volume. And the higher the volume, the lower you can get labor. But there's definitely a floor there because you have to have the amount of people to let the store crank out. So in our California stores, on average, we have around 23% labor. Arizona is around 22, and Oregon's somewhere in the middle there. We have this new best of the best scorecard that we just rolled out, which is a point system that we're doing per each KPI. And each week it's communicated where they are, if they're sitting in the top 10%, bottom 10%, or somewhere in the middle. But the idea is at the end of the year, and this is our first year doing it, at the end of the year we're going to have 5 winners that achieve the most points based off of they're all individual KPIs. So then we're going to take these 5 winners to Las Vegas with their significant others, or if they want to bring a friend, and they get to be around like a round table of the other best performing GMs, but also the leadership team. So my partners and I are going to go, our CFO, our VP of Ops, and people. So we get to spend some time with these people that really just crushed it in 2025, and really excited about that because the team is excited to be competitive, but also like have something at the end of the rainbow that's not just like a monetary bonus, or it's that we get to really show appreciation. And they all have a chance to win because they're competing against their specific store KPIs. So it's not just like, hey, just because you have a high performing store that you have some easy metrics to hit, that it's all kind of relative to based off their store and their previous year that the store was able to achieve.
I could see that being a really good cultural impact, especially the size of your platform. I mean, a lot of room for upward mobility then I'd imagine many of the employees probably expected when they first applied to a job at Little Caesars.
Yeah, it's crazy. We have, so we run in our Cedars Group company, it's called the Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS. So we have, are you familiar with it at all?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it's great. We have our level 10 meetings with the leadership team, and we try to have that flow down to the store level. But one of the big things that you do at the beginning is you create your mission statement and core values, and those are very, very clearly communicated to our stores. We have plaques in each of our restaurants that has our mission statement and core values, and we want them to know what we're about and that we're Cedars Group and we're different than Little Caesars as a whole, and they have owners that care about them and care about the culture. We recently did a town hall where the leadership team spoke to the entire anybody that wanted to join and let them ask questions. We told them about like our plans for the year, what we're planning on doing. Told them even about Coco Playa and the opportunities that we're working on, as well as reiterated the core values and the mission statement, and then let them ask questions. And we got some really interesting feedback and questions from the group. And when you have over 800 people in the company, obviously not 800 people joined that call, but most of the GMs, I would say 95% of the GMs, some co-managers, and the rest of our support center joined. We had maybe 100 people on the call, and being able to share with them like the cool stuff that we're working on, that the culture stuff, the growth, the potentials that they have. There was one guy that stood up, he was a GM in Bakersfield that ended up becoming an area coach in Oregon, and he's loving life, and he shared with the group about how happy his kids are in Oregon, and the opportunity that they're thankful for the opportunity that we gave him to move them out there. So it's just cool seeing that stuff, and it's cool seeing that we can make a difference in these people's lives that, like you said, they're applying for a job at Little Caesars. They don't really think anything of it. They don't think about what the company is that owns it. They don't know about the owners, us, whatever. They just think it's some big conglomerate, and they're surprised to find out that we actually really care in our employees and want the best for them.
I did want to ask you about, just the labor. You said 30 people per store. A lot of people's gripes with QSR and restaurants in general is labor. Like they don't want to manage the head count. The turnover's so high. Some people, it feels like I only hear about it after the fact, but they basically just like rage sell their locations because they're pulling their hair out and they want out of the industry. You don't, just the way you talk about it, you don't seem like you're at all in that mental state. So how do you manage it to a point where it's obviously leading to success in your stores, where others in the QSR world are pulling their hair out, and it's a massive factor in why a lot of people don't even want to own a restaurant?
Yeah, it all starts with being able to show them a path for success and growth within the company. And I see why, some smaller operators maybe don't have that, hey, you can eventually be this and this and this. And that's why, like I mentioned earlier, we have different positions within the store, and all of them come with like a little bit of a raise and a test that lets them feel ownership in progressing within the store, even if it's coming from being a crew member to a cashier, whether it's a 20-cent raise, but they've passed the test, and now they can be a cashier, and they take pride and they take ownership in being that. And I think for me, I've been very fortunate to surround myself with great leaders and great operators. So like my partner, Johnny, he's an amazing leader when it comes to the operating in the store and incentivizing and motivating people. Every time you hear him talk, and he talks about having Little Caesars, when he goes into the store, he goes, let's make this place Disneyland. Everyone needs to be having fun. And that's like his quote, that his email sign-off is always remember to smile. He's just like the ultimate optimistic person. And so I feel very fortunate to surround myself with great people that are great at that. But, I think the biggest thing that we try to do is just make sure that people are well taken care of, that they feel confident in their leadership team. And it starts from the top, right? I can talk about culture and try to have a culture in my store, but if I'm not in the store every day, it's really hard for anything to happen. So that's why we're always talking so much to our area coaches and our directors about like how important it is to like ask how someone's doing, how's their day going. And I don't want to say that we have it perfect by any means. We've had so many labor issues at different stores and different places. I do think from a geographic standpoint, some markets are a lot easier to hire in than others, and they're a lot easier to motivate people, and it's definitely a challenge for everybody. But I would say to individual operators that are potentially struggling with it is to just build a system and stay true to it. And if people can know that you're consistent and you're not, making favors for someone and doing, they know like this is who you are, this is how you operate. I think it works a lot better than being the person that's all over the place. And potentially people are more willing to follow a leader that they can rely on, and that shows some consistency.
Yeah, and I also like how you talked about, you've clearly outlined a path for that new employee who's maybe just a crew member, but then it's, hey, like next step up is cashier. And then there's this hierarchy that you can see rise up in, not just within the store. For you guys, it's now within the greater platform. So that would be a good thing for a lot of business owners to hear, right? That because a lot of people are just so busy wearing a million different hats, they probably haven't even had time to think about not just outlining that, but then being able to communicate that to their employees. So it's pretty obvious you guys are really dialed in on that side of things. As far as the competition. I think this is just interesting whenever I speak to someone like yourself who owns a blue chip brand in the franchise world. How dialed in are you? And maybe even just, you go to the franchisee conference every year. Is everyone like talking about Domino's and Pizza Hut and Papa John's? Like, do you guys have your eyes on the competition? And do you know, are they looking at you guys? Even to the level of, do you know how the inner workings of a Domino's or a Pizza Hut shop works? Like, do they have the same ovens as you guys? Because I have no idea, but I'd be curious to know what level, again, of detail you guys have on that type of stuff.
I don't think the conversation is surrounded around competition, but there are several presentations during the conference where they're showing how we compare to our competition. And they'll typically try to show the ones where we win. So from like a leadership standpoint, like to motivate the franchisees and stuff, because there is a lot of talk, right? So there's the vendor expo, and you're talking to the oven vendors. And of course, they're going to be like, yeah, this is the same one that all of Domino's uses. So for the most part, I know what they're putting in their stores and what they're working on. We don't have like insider information of, oh, Domino's is about to roll out stuffed crust for the first time ever. I'm sure some franchisees knew that. I mean, when I saw it, I was like, oh, cool, good for them. Like, I think it's important to track these things from a marketing side of things of like, all right, what promotions are Domino's running right now, or Papa John's or Pizza Hut, and what is it doing to our sales? Are our sales down this week because Domino's just rolled out the stuffed crust and they're spending billions of dollars on marketing to promote it, or are they down because of something else, or are they up, or did it not matter? So being able to like know the numbers and see and understand like why things are happening or is important. I think a lot of the conversation in the Little Caesars ecosystem is less about what the others are doing and more about minimum wage. And like, what's California doing? And like, oh my gosh, it's so hard to operate in these states, or I'm avoiding this, or so I think there's that. And then there's always a certain level of scrutiny of what the franchisor is doing. Personally, I think that they're doing a great job, and Dave Scrivano and his leadership team are, the numbers speak for themselves. They're doing awesome. But there's always people that are like, oh, I can't believe they're making us do this, or keeping the price point at this. And at the end of the day, you got to understand, like, it's okay to challenge the franchisor sometimes, but there's also a political standpoint that you got to be careful with. There's some people that I see that are just challenging it way too much. And it's like, all right, I mean, you're still using their brand, and you have to be a little bit appreciative of the R&D, and they're not just shooting from the hip here. So I think there's a lot of that kind of rumblings, but generally the last few years of the conference have been great because the franchisees are doing well. And going back to what we were talking about earlier in the conversation, it wasn't always like that. I wasn't there to remember, but I know that there's been a lot of innovation happening. There's a lot of cool things that the brand is doing. So I'm excited. I'm bullish on Little Caesars in the future, and I'm excited to continue to be a part of them. I'm still looking for acquisition targets. I'm going to build a few stores for Little Caesars in Oregon. And yeah, we're definitely happy with the brand.
That's, I think, a good time to segue, because I want to talk about Jersey Mike's and Coco Playa, of course. You've clearly focused majority by a large amount to date on Little Caesars. So how do you think about the expansion? When do you just double down and triple down on the brand, on one brand like Little Caesars, versus grow your portfolio by growing within a new brand? And with Jersey Mike's, correct me if I'm wrong, so you have one store open, and I believe maybe the territories for a few more, and you got that first Jersey Mike's pretty quickly after, when you only had 2 or 3 Little Caesars. So what was the calculus in your head as far as, let's run with Little Caesars for now? And Jersey Mike's done phenomenal in the. I think their sales has gone up like 60 or 50% since you bought in on an average unit volume. So yeah, just walk us through kind of how you think about these things.
Yeah, I've gotten at a good time with Jersey Mike's, and they've been crushing it since. Well, first I'll start with saying I think the brands I'm involved in all complement each other very well, right? So, and that was kind of by design, right? So Coco Playa, you can go and get a coffee in the morning, and then the lunch day part is where Jersey Mike's dominates. The dinner day part is where Little Caesars dominates. And then, you can go and grab a cookie from Coco Playa at night. So in the perfect world, someday my goal is to have them all right next to each other, all ones that I own, and someone can just live in that center and never have to leave. So I think that it's exciting to me that we're all very complementary, but there's only so many day parts, and we plan to keep, expanding. So I'm still looking at other brands all the time. And I got asked this question the other day about what should people look for when they're looking at brands, which is something I love to do, and I know you love to do, and we can geek out about that stuff all day long. Yeah. But the first thing I look at is where the brand is on their journey. If it's an emerging brand, is it creating a new lane altogether? Is it a trend? Is it all hype based? So I think that's pretty important to know that. And then for us, I think I look at operational fit, right? So even though all my brands are very different, they all kind of play nicely behind the scenes with each other. You know, similar build outs, similar footprints, similar tech stacks, similar labor pool, right? And then the stuff that we do for culture, we can apply it from Jersey Mike's at Little Caesars at Coco Playa. It's all kind of the same. And you know, I'll give an example. There was this brand I really liked that I think I already talked about this in the earlier, but about that having a bar. Like I just wasn't a good fit for me because I don't want to learn the bar industry right now. I like what we're doing everywhere else, so we passed on that. And then the franchisor matters a lot, right? I do a deep dive on the leadership team, how they operate, how do they play with franchisees, how they communicate, how do they support them. I know it's pretty well known now in the industry, but if you're ever going to even think about speaking with the brand, I would speak with their franchisees first, right? They're the ones that know how the franchisor is to them, and it's important that you have a good franchisor and a good leadership team. So getting to talk to other operators is huge, which is why, you know, I go to all these conferences and I'm always talking to different operators of different businesses, and I feel like even before I touch an FDD, I probably know a good amount about the brand because of some operator I've talked to, and that's why I'm picking it up. And you know, it's important to have brands that still protect the brand but empower the operators, right? It's still our company, and we're, you know, a lot of people are investing their life savings into this thing. So you want to give them a little bit of flexibility to operate it the way that they see fit, but also in a framework that allows them to protect the brand. I think Jersey Mike's does a really good job about this. Most Jersey Mike's you go into, you probably are getting the same experience or pretty close to that experience because of the way that they've set up their organization to be very involved in making sure that things are adhering to the 7 principles and, you know, Jersey Mike standards. And then I've been lucky because I'm in 2 amazing franchise brands, and I've heard so many horror stories about just brands that get caught up in politics and like lawsuits and liquidated damages and, you know, top-down mandates, and it's just, you know, those are all hard pass for me, right? And then the numbers have to work, right? And we're always, you know, I'm sure you've looked at a bunch of item 19s. That's a big place that you spend some time. So I like to look at those, but then like look at how they look long term. So if it's a commodity that fluctuates in price, and 2024 was a great year for that price, for that commodity, maybe, you know, see what some bad years look like and see how they fit and how they change. Because it's really difficult to fall in love with a concept. You're like, oh man, this is going to be great, and then you find out that like it doesn't make any money because it doesn't make sense to invest in something if the economics don't work. So the brand could be great, the leadership team could be great, but if the economics don't work, then you have to really think about what you're doing there. There's a lot that goes into it, more than I'm just saying with these 4 points, but I think it's like one of the most fun things for me is to just kind of dive into different brands and finding the emerging ones or finding the legacy one that's kind of goes under the radar. And you and JT do a great job of pointing those out. I've learned so much from you guys in terms of those new brands and old brands, and it's just fun to dive into that stuff.
Totally, man. No, that's like what I do for a living. I feel like instead of a stock analyst, I'm like a FTD analyst. When you were looking at Jersey Mike's, and I think even Jimmy John's, I guess you looked at too. I'm curious if I know it was a while ago, but was there anything in particular, even back then? I think now it's obvious. Okay, you definitely made the right call. Jersey Mike's is just dominating this subcategory. But yeah. I don't think it was that obvious. It wasn't that obvious back in 2016. So what were you seeing then? And again, also, is there a reason why you you grew from 2 to 33 Little Caesars, but you're still at the one Jersey Mike's. So is it just a bandwidth issue as far as being able to expand more there?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. When I was super focused on expanding Little Caesars, and opportunities were flying our way more than we could take on. We said no to a lot of things. And at the time, that was what was coming on my desk. There's not a lot of transfers in Jersey Mike's. And if there are, I'm not seeing them. I'm not as plugged into the system as I am with Little Caesars. So from that perspective, that was just an opportunity thing, and when I'm looking at bandwidth, and I don't want to stretch myself too thin. I think that we can do it now because we have such a good base and system, but back then, if I was growing the same speed as I was growing with Little Caesars, I don't know if I'd be sitting here today. So that's the second part of your question. The first part was, I was a huge Jersey Mike's fan. Like, I'm talking go to there is probably as much as you go to Dunkin'. like 5 times a week, I get a different thing every time. I could spend all my time at Jersey Mike's. And I was also, it fit with my core values of just giving back to the community. I like absolutely love how they do their month of giving and the day of giving. And Peter Cancro, just the way that he gives back to the franchisees. And I talked to a handful of franchisees, and they were just like obsessed with the brand. There's a lot of old Domino's people that worked at Jersey Mike's, but there's one gentleman that I really connect with. And I went to his house and learned more about Jersey Mike's through him and the difference between Domino's and Jersey Mike's. And I was sold. And then I got to meet the leadership team with Hoyt, who's no longer there. And they just like even sold me more on it. And it was just a very different experience than I got when I was in meeting with Jimmy John's. And I don't know, because I didn't have the opportunity to be a Jimmy John's fan. We don't have any near us at the time. But I think the one piece that set me over was just their culture of giving back and how much they really care about the franchisee's success, but also the community's success. And that goes hand in hand with what I saw with what my dad did in Bakersfield when I was growing up and how I wanted to run my company. And I was like, man, these guys already do that. That's exactly the type of brand I want to be a part of.
They seem to be one of the few, if only, brands that, because I think a lot of brands give the lip service. Oh yeah, we care about giving, and maybe there's like a annual promotion of a charity. And I'm not knocking that. There's a difference between saying that you care, but then really putting your money where your mouth is. And when you look at the history of Jersey Mike's, I mean, you could tell that Peter Cancro, it's just been a value, and it's been something that he's wanted to do the whole time. And I dig into this stuff. So for those who don't know, it comes from when he acquired it was Mike's Subs at the time. And I think there were a few local businessmen. I think one owned an ice cream shop. But they were big in the community and always giving back to charities. And when he started franchising it, it was just, hey, like, we're going to do this. And it's crazy just to think that was 30 plus years ago. And now the scale at which you guys are able to give back is really awesome to see. I'd love to learn about, I've heard the training at Jersey Mike's is pretty extensive. I've heard like Jersey Mike's takes like a month just to be able to get on the slicer, even as a franchisee. And it's like a 16-week training program. So I know you can't obviously share the secret sauce, so to speak, but can you kind of just speak to the overview of what training looks like and how it maybe differs for that of a Little Caesars?
It's phase 1, 2, and 3. And phase 1 and 3 are store level and managerial level things. And then phase 2 is you go out to Jersey for a week. But phase 1 and 3, they take, several weeks. It's until you pass a test, right? And the test they're pretty serious about passing. And they grade you on every little thing from opening procedures to actually like working the line and all that. And you have to be doing it pretty perfect. I mean, you have to score over 90% to pass. So if you can knock that out in 4 weeks or, and pass, that's great. But if, some people it takes way longer. So when I sent my GM and my 2 assistants had to all go to training and train at a store in Phoenix. And it was a long process, I think a 3-month process that I had to invest in 3 different people to do that process and then send one of them to Jersey. So I think it goes to show the importance of the operations within the Jersey Mike's brand, and that's something that I really value with them. But after you have one store open, you can do the phase 1 and the phase 3 within your own store as long as your like area director comes and does the test for those employees. But getting off the ground, either the franchisees doing it and multiple employees, and they take it really serious. And I think that's what separates them from a lot of other brands. I think Culver's has a pretty strenuous training process, and it differs from brand to brand. Luckily, I got exempt from doing it at Little Caesars, given my history with the brand. But yeah.
You were basically living at the store your whole life, so that's good that they gave you a break there.
Yeah.
If there's emerging franchisors listening to this, I hope the light bulbs are going off where it's not just about making a franchisee pass a bunch of arbitrary tests. This is the way to protect the brand so that when they do actually take over and you're not over their shoulder, you know that they have what it takes to maintain the quality that you expect. And then if you're a franchisee evaluating it, I think I got this from one of the Dave's Hot Chicken franchisees was telling me they have a high standard of franchisees that they'd accept. And for him, he's like, I gravitated towards the brand because he's like, to me, like that means that they're focused on protecting the brand. I can feel comfortable knowing that every franchisee in the system already owns restaurants. And so I don't have to worry about buying in at a certain state or a certain stage. And then, the brand reputation nationally is going to be tarnished because they let in a bunch of folks who don't really know what they're doing. And Jersey Mike's is doing the same thing, just in a different way, right? They clearly have a pretty stringent operating standard that you have to literally pass a test to even get going as a franchisee. So that would make me feel good as a franchisee knowing that like everyone has to pass that. Before getting to Coco Playa, I'm curious, is your plan within the short term between Jersey Mike's and Little Caesars? Are you still just looking for deals with Little Caesars? I know it's been tough lately, but or do you plan to transition more to Jersey Mike's at any point?
Yeah, I think again, it just always goes back to what's right for me at the time. If there is an opportunity that presents itself with Jersey Mike's, I'll jump all over it. I think I'm at a good point with them, with my operations and my team there. And I can't say that has been the case all the time. Just like with any business, you go through peaks and troughs and all that. And I have some stuff under development with Little Caesars. I'm spending a lot of time on Coco Playa, so I'm just trying to be cognizant of maintaining my sanity and my mindset, as well as still growing smart. Like I mentioned before, we ramped up really fast, so we spent some time catching up to that. And I think our company is at an amazing point now. We have a full finance team, we have a full HR team, so we're set up to scale going forward. So now it's just about the opportunities that present themselves.
Amazing. Well, I'm sure you'll continue to crush it, and the Feghali name will just infiltrate more and more of Little Caesars over time. Well, let's talk about Coco Playa, man. I have a bunch of questions about it, but before I even get to that, you just give the audience a quick summary of what the concept is.
Yeah, I was super interested in the franchise coffee space and then the franchise cookie space separately. But like I mentioned earlier, I was looking at different brands all the time, and I wasn't super content with what I was seeing out there. And this is actually a little bit before the 7 Brew days and all that whole blow up that we've seen. I remember when I think it was you that first shared their FDD with the 8 stores that were doing like 2.4, and you were like, you had teased about it at first, and then you kind of presented it. But I was already working on Coco Playa before I even came across them. So my 2 partners, Jeff and Johnny, who I mentioned, were partners at Cedars Group, and then we have 2 additional partners, Gabriel and George Shamas, who are my best friends out here in San Diego. And we were all at the dinner one time, and we were talking about, I was telling them about some concepts I was looking at. I think I was looking at scooters at the time, and a cookie plug, and just some random stuff. And I was just like, I'm not super excited about either of these things, but I think that could work to do something in San Diego with the coffee space. I know in San Diego we have a lot of competition, obviously, but I think that it was missing like one of these drive-through 7 Brew Dutch Bros type coffees, which Dutch Bros just recently entered San Diego like 2 years ago. So we started out with like, all right, can we do this ourselves? And the answer was yes, but should we? Then one of my friends was like, hey, how hard could it be? Gabe and George are entrepreneurs as well, and they're like, with 5 people, this can't be that difficult. We were proven wrong, but it ended up becoming, we wanted to do a coffee and cookie concept, and we wanted it to be kind of like, you see Dunkin' and all these different like drive-through coffee donut places, but we were like, well, I think that there's an idea there about having a drive-through cookie place. With cookies are hot right now. If you're trying to go to a party and want to grab something on your way, and it's you probably don't want to bring donuts to a party, but people are bringing crumble to parties all the time. I see it everywhere, like some very novelty cookies. So the idea was to create this coffee cookie place with these sugary drinks and the ones at like Dutch Bros and Starbucks and what was hot at the time. So we started working on this project, shooting ideas here and there, and it started to get real and start to pick up some steam. And the genesis was like, all right, how can we empower our community through happiness and energy? And coffee and cookies were a good way to do that, but the customer service was the forefront of what we wanted to achieve with Coco Playa. So eventually we came across a location which was an old taco shop, and it was still operating, but we talked to the owner and we were like, hey, would you be interested in selling this taco shop to us? And fast forward, he did, and we ended up owning a taco shop at the time. We were like, all right, now we got to shut down this taco shop, and we signed a new lease with the landlord, and that's how Coco Playa was really born. So we kind of put lipstick on a pig. We built out the inside of Coco Playa. We hired some great people that have built coffee shops before and for layouts and all that. But we tried to really do a proof of concept, just bare bones, as little investment as we can. But what we really wanted to spend our investment, our money, is making it look like this thing is a franchisable brand. So we spent a good amount of money on the branding, the name, the logos, the website. And when we get it still to this day, people are like, oh, where's this franchise out of? We're like, no, this is the flagship. But going back to the taco shop, it had a soda machine in it because it was a taco shop and it already had the lines hosed in. And so we were thinking, what? Swig was kind of coming on the scene, and all these little dirty soda brands. And we have all of the syrups, so we have all the creamers and all that from the coffee. So why don't we try just some dirty sodas using the stuff that we already have on hand? So we made a section of our menu that has like the dirty soda section, and we kind of did a lot of research and figure out like we didn't want to make it too broad. We just wanted to put a handful of items there and see where it goes. Fast forward to June 1st of 2024. That was when we had our grand opening, and it's crazy. Like it blew up right off the bat. Obviously, it's a lot of marketing and all that went into it, but the dirty sodas were like the number one category. Like people were like, and people would get coffee and the cookies and stuff, but like the dirty sodas were crushing it. And we didn't realize that this would be like the big thing that drove people to Coco Playa. And it, kind of came serendipitously, and we're happy that we were just kind of like throw things at the wall and see what sticks. But the one thing that we stayed true to is creating an amazing customer experience. So it's almost like they come up, someone orders to a person, we kind of walk them through our treasure map of a menu, which is kind of broad because we have the cookies and the cold brews and the coffee and the signature drinks and stuff. And then, we kind of just get to know our customers a little bit better. And now we have so many regulars. We have people that we look at our loyalty program. We have people that come every single day. And it's really just kind of been a journey. And one of the big things is that as a part of the franchise system, you don't realize how difficult some aspects of the business are until you have to do them yourself. So like with Coco Playa, we have to find all of our suppliers and vendors and packaging, and we have to do all of our own marketing. All of these things are very, very time consuming. And even like negotiating with Cisco, we don't have the capacity to, like how Jersey Mike says, hey, we'll buy this many things from you if we get a good deal. Like as a brand new shop, we don't have that kind of leverage. And so we started off with pretty high cost of goods, and we've had to like negotiate that as we've come down in the last year that we've been open. But these are things that you don't really take into consideration as a franchisee, how lucky you are to have a big brand that's like negotiating on your behalf and like supply, like getting the packaging and doing the marketing and all these different little things that like are very time consuming and very difficult to get done. So there's a lot of learning in the whole Coco Playa journey. We're very excited about it. We closed our first year June 1st a couple weeks back, and we did 1.3 our first year, which was it far exceeded our expectations, and we were on track to do even much more this year. I think that as long as we continue to keep the customer experience up there and make everyone feel special and happy and brighten their day with cookies and coffee and dirty sodas, as well as keep our marketing on point, which has been a huge priority for us. The sky is the limit, but again, we're just super early in this process, and it's all very, very exciting.
I'd imagine, just especially your two brands that you've been in before you started Coco Playa, both national brands. So yeah, I'd imagine there's a lot of just realizations of, oh wow, I've never had to worry about this because the brand had it taken care of. But I also think it's fascinating, this beverage category. I'm glad the timing of this episode I think is great, because we have Taco Bell's Live Más Cafe that they're starting to double down on. McDonald's shut down Cosmix, but that they're going to be rolling out a lot of the top beverages and just all the data they probably got from those stores into the actual McDonald's stores that have the capacity to serve more beverages. And then, like you said, Seven Brew, Dutch Bros, Swig leading the dirty soda specifically category. Where do you think it's all heading? And for you, do you think coffee is the opportunity, or do you think dirty soda is actually going to stick around?
Yeah, so I mean, you brought up a bunch of good points. I was going to talk about them a little, and even like Crumble is testing dirty sodas now, I hear.
They are in Canada, yeah.
Yeah, so I think these are smart companies. If they're looking at doing it, then it must be for a reason. But I think there's a couple different aspects to look at. Number one, there's a lot of data out there and some big studies that come out that's talking about Gen Z and how they're consuming so much less alcohol than millennials and boomers, other generations. And I see it because I have a Gen Z younger sister. And just with our customers at Coco Playa. And if you look at our average customer, they are exactly that. They are Gen Z. And I see what they're ordering. And one of the big things of that study is that Gen Z consumers are more prone to having energy drinks later in the day than coffee. And at Coco Playa, we sell Red Bull, and we sell this energy shot that you can put into any dirty soda or drink called Lotus. It's like a plant-based energy. And that specific demographic absolutely loves it. And they're going and they're grabbing a handful of dirty sodas and energy drinks and going to the beach. Instead of our generation went and grabbed a handful of beers and went to the beach, they're opting for that. So if you think about like generational trends, and then as these Gen Zers start to grow up, I'm just speaking from my own experience, over the years become more and more sensitive to caffeine. I'm not drinking energy drinks after 2 p.m. anymore because I'm up all night. So I'm wondering if that just translates from going from energy drinks to dirty sodas, right? Minor caffeine, but still have the flavored profile, and it allows them to share a drink with their peers and still feel good and sober and whatever it might be. So I think as they grow up, they'll transfer a little bit more from the energy drinks to the dirty sodas. So I do think it has legs. So I'm bullish on it. I think that there's a lot of opportunity, especially in areas where people don't drink and the other places outside of the United States. But the fact that it's doing so well in the U.S., it's super interesting because I was almost in your camp. Like, does this work outside of Utah? And it very clearly does.
Does this all converge, right? Does Swig eventually add coffee to their menu, or they just stick with dirty soda and then?
So Swig used to have coffee. Yeah, I think they took it off the menu and they just wanted to focus on their product. But yeah, it's a good question because we do still sell like coffee-based drinks are a huge part of our menu still. I mean, they're not as big as the dirty sodas, but if we didn't have those, I don't know how we would do in terms of numbers, but definitely not as good as we do now. So I think it's a valuable piece of our business. And I could see maybe Swig bringing them back just to be able to compete with the Seven Brews and the Dutch Bros of the world, because even Dutch Bros, if you look at their product mix, which they talk about in their earnings calls and stuff, it's high percentage energy drinks, like very similar numbers than what we're doing. So it was interesting to see that because you think of Dutch Bros coffee and that's in their name and stuff, but it's a lot of people are just really gravitating towards their energy drink options.
I'm curious, like, what are the margins that you see on this relative to your other concepts? Because to me, I've spoke with Dunkin' owners, and like coffee's, of course, the highest margin product they sell. I mean, in all beverage, I know you do cookies too, but for the most part, mostly beverages going out the door. I'd imagine you're seeing potentially some pretty high margins relative to your other concepts.
Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, we still are one store, so we don't have the purchasing power that we will get with scale. And dairy is definitely one of the higher cost items when it comes to our product mix. Coffee beans obviously fluctuate for us based off of the coffee market and stuff. I think you're asking specifically about dirty sodas, and they're great margins. When you get into the energy drink piece of it, which we're still using Red Bull, the margins kind of diminish quickly because Red Bulls are expensive. And this is a route we're looking at taking, is white labeling our own energy drink and all that. Once we get across that bridge, I think the margins there will increase quite a bit. So yeah, the margins are definitely better than a lot of our other products. The one caveat is this. At Little Caesars, I think our average ticket is around $20. At Jersey Mike's, I think it's like around $24. At Coco Playa, we're sitting at like $11.50. So when you think about that, you have to crank out a lot of people to do $1.5 million a year. Like, that's pretty much double the amount of people than you'd have to do at like a Little Caesars or a Jersey Mike's. So the one thing that we're really trying to work on is increasing the ticket average. And I think the cookie comes into play there. We have pretzel bites that come into play. But in order to, really make up for the labor, that piece of it, which is, if you're cranking out double the amount of customers you have to do at Little Caesars or Jersey Mike's, you have a lot of people working hard, so you have to have a higher amount of people on staff, and I think that's where the margins start to get limited, is the labor piece, especially here in California.
That makes total sense. And the average ticket size, that's a pretty big delta between your other brands. You said this, and this is one of the questions I wanted to ask before we wrap up here, which is, you said San Diego is missing kind of like that drive-through style concept. As someone who looked at Seven Brew, obviously you're digging into Dutch Bros earnings reports, so like this space. What is it about drive-through concepts in particular, do you think, that really speak to the customer? Because I feel like it's more than convenience. That's the obvious answer, right? It's like if I go to Dunkin', not every Dunkin' is drive-through. I might have to park, get out of the car, yada, yada, yada. But like these drive-through coffee shops, like even some of the emerging ones, and Dutch Bros kind of is known for this too, the culture and like the whole vibe. It's like this more fun, customer service-y experience where like there's a lot of energy coming from the brand to the customer. And I don't know, I guess I'm just curious about this whole drive-through culture and would love to hear your take on it, because it is different than just your typical coffee shop, whether that's a local or your Dunkin', your Tim Hortons, or your Starbucks. So like, what do you think it is about drive-through coffee that's just making it feels like a very popular moment in time right now?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's the hardest part about the scaling of this concept, is that we're leaning in on the drive-through, because everybody wants drive-through right now. So when we're looking at new sites, which we're definitely looking to expand, it's hard to find them because we're competing with everybody. San Diego has a local place called Better Buzz.
Yes, I've been there many times. Yeah.
Yeah, so Better Buzz and Dutch and Seven Brew and Swig, all of us are all looking for drive-thru, but also Chipotle is. We have a couple Little Caesars that are drive-thru. So it's a very high demand. I think the consumer tends to be going towards having smaller meals more frequently throughout the day. So I think it goes back to actually convenience, right? And I was looking at the Technomic data for brands that had growth of 25% or more in 2024. And there was 37 brands, and of those 37, 45% of them were coffee and other beverages. So the growth in the space, it is coming from the beverage. And I think it's because people are not having the time, whether it's the time to sit down for big meals or whatever it might be, or they're just kind of on the go. They're trying to look for convenience, and they don't want to just like have park someplace, run into a restaurant, grab a bag off of a shelf and have no interaction, because spending all of their time on devices and not really seeing people in person, that 5 minutes of sitting in the line and then someone making your day, making a joke, whatever, and then them grabbing their drink and then heading off to work, back to work, or wherever they're going, school, I think for a lot of our customers, it's just having that interaction that just like brightens their day just a little bit, and they know that they're going to get a drink that's going to be great. They don't have to get out of their car. They get to interact with a human being and do that a couple times a day. We just had our 1-year anniversary, and we were doing dollar drinks, and I had people that were coming maybe 5 times. It was my 5th time down here today, and we had a line wrapped around the entire pretty much city, like gridlocked it. It was crazy. We had to cut it off at the end of the day. We didn't realize that we did like over 3,000 drinks just in that one day from
Holy crap.
yeah, from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. So it's definitely something that people want, and I think people like to take the pictures of it. That's our kind of our biggest marketing component, is people just wanting to tag us and show off the drink that they got and how cool it looks, but also you'll see like a little bag on their lap or something. They're not really showing off, but it's like little maybe banana bread they got from us, or the pretzels or whatever. So I think just having some convenience, just so they can kind of also have that customer interaction, that employee interaction, where someone cares about them and is giving them some energy and some recognition of it's a beautiful day to be alive.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, you're dead right on. I mean, it's very Instagrammable products, so that always helps just to drive awareness of the brand. Yeah, man, it's going to be fascinating just to see where this all goes in this category specifically. And to kind of wrap up here, do you have a specific goal with Coco Playa? Yeah, I'm curious if you're dead set on franchising it at some point, or maybe you'll figure it out as you go.
I get asked that quite a bit. I think the right answer is I think that we still have a lot to prove within our current store and proof of concept outside of that one unit. So we're definitely planning on building some more, and we are hoping they do as good or even better than the current one. And then we can assess whether it makes sense to franchise it out or keep growing just within as a corporate unit and maintaining the standards that we expect. But I'm not opposed to any route. I just think it's so early to make a decision on that. I think that you have to have a certain amount of margin of profitability to expect anybody to ever franchise something from you. So once we hit that goal, I think somewhere around the 30%, if you're going to pay royalties and all the other fees that come along with franchising, you want to at least expect to make 15 to 20% bottom line. So once we get to where we want to be as the corporate unit, then we can start assessing where to go from there. We're not there yet. I mean, 1 year in, we're still, negotiating with our vendors and suppliers, and we're still trying to make the margins look amazing, and we've made a lot of progress on that. Huge thanks to my partners. My partner Gabe is really spearheading all those relationships, and it's a tough job and it takes a lot of work. I'm very bullish on the top line growth that we've had and the hype that we continue to have. Now we just got to work on the middle of the P&L and get it to a point where it's presentable and we show it to people and they get excited about it. And, I think it takes some time to get there. If we were to do it in 1 year, I would head over heels excited, but I did not expect that. So I think we're right on the path that we expected to be on.
Yeah, I think your head's definitely in the right place. I wish a lot more franchisors thought like you as far as 15 to 20% margins after royalties. And yeah, I mean, so I'm hoping you guys continue to grow and crush it. Both in Coco Playa.
I'm a franchisee first, right? So
yeah,
I know exactly what it takes to want to be a franchisee of something, and if I would never want to set anybody up for failure. And I also understand how difficult it is to be a franchisor. Like, I mean, just running the corporate unit is hard enough, but it's like a whole nother business with actually just being able to generate good franchisees, a pipeline or a funnel of good franchisees. Like the Dave's Hot Chicken thing that you mentioned earlier is, you want people to feel super confident about their peers, and you don't want to just sell to anybody. And I think that being able to really hone in on that requires a full-time job and a lot of money. And so I think that you have to be really careful about franchising too early. And I know we can probably talk about that for another hour, but it's a very delicate balance of when it
Yeah.
makes sense, and it's people's lives on the line,
Exactly. It's a major responsibility. So, well, yeah, man, look, I'm excited to watch you continue to grow it and even grow the rest of your portfolio beyond that. So, look, man, it's been a lot of fun having you on the show. Long overdue over the last few years. And is there anywhere online specifically where you'd like to kind of give people a place if they want to follow along your journey if they're not familiar with you yet?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for having me. It's been great to get to know you over the last couple of years. My parents, when I was growing up, and I was growing up in the age of like AOL Instant Messenger and stuff, they were like, be very careful of who you meet on the internet. And it's kind of funny that like, we became friends from X and Twitter and,
It's
JT and
two
all.
anonymous accounts.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, so I mean, I guess that's a good place where people can find me is I'm QSR guy on Twitter or X, and on LinkedIn, I'm Ryan Feghali. If you want to follow along with the Coco Playa journey, our handle on all social media accounts is Try Coco Playa, so TRYCOCO Playa, PLAYA. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for me. I'm just happy to
Awesome.
be here and be able to talk franchising with the man, the myth, the legend.
I appreciate it, man. Well, thanks for all that you're doing for the community too, man. And folks will have his links to all the Coco Playa assets as well as his Twitter and LinkedIn in the show notes. So if you're not following, definitely follow along some of the best content in the QSR world and franchise world. Well, good to talk, and we'll have you on maybe in a year or so when hopefully your portfolio is even a lot bigger and maybe you have some more tricks up your sleeve as far as announcements.
Yeah, yeah. There's one thing I'm working on I can't really talk about yet, but I am writing a book, so maybe
Oh,
when we release that, we can
yeah.
plot me back on and we can talk a little bit about what I'm doing with that book. So
Sweet.
thanks for having me.
All right, man. Awesome. We'll talk soon.